The Galactic Military Academy's auditorium buzzed with the usual mixture of excitement and tension that preceded combat theory examinations. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of species filled the tiered seating, their various forms of chittering, growling, and humming, creating a symphony of nervous energy. Among them sat Diana Reeves, the only human in her class, her dark hair pulled back in regulation style as she reviewed her notes one final time. 3 rows behind her, Adnan Chen, her study partner and closest friend at the academy, watched with growing unease as a group of Zephyrian cadets whispered among themselves, their reptilian eyes fixed on Diana's back. The Zephyrians had made no secret of their disdain for humanity's recent inclusion in the Galactic Defense Force, claiming humans were too weak and primitive to deserve a place among the star's warriors. "She doesn't belong here," hissed Krex, the largest of the Zephyrians, his forked tongue tasting the air. "Today we prove it." Adnan's jaw tightened. He'd grown up on Earth's colonies, where humans had learned to rely on each other against hostile environments. Diana had become like a sister to him during their months of training together, and he wouldn't let anyone harm her, though he wondered what exactly 4 humans could do against a dozen battle-trained reptilian warriors. Professor Vextar, a towering centaurian with 4 arms and crystalline skin, called the examination to order. "Today's practical assessment will test your ability to think under pressure. You will face simulated combat scenarios designed to push your species to its absolute limits." The lights dimmed, and holographic enemies materialized throughout the auditorium. The test had begun. Diana found herself facing a pack of simulated void hunters, shadowy creatures known for their speed and viciousness. She moved with practiced efficiency, her smaller human frame allowing her to dodge attacks that would have crushed larger species. But this was exactly what Krex had been waiting for. While the proctor's attention was focused on monitoring the holographic scenarios, Krex and his companions disabled the safety protocols around Diana's testing area. What should have been harmless light constructs suddenly became solid, deadly threats. The first sign something was wrong came when Diana's combat knife, which should have passed harmlessly through a holographic enemy, instead struck solid flesh. The void hunter she'd been fighting roared in very real pain and fury, its claws extending toward her throat. "Safety protocols compromised in Sector 7, announced the Academy's AI, but the damage was already done. 3 very real, very angry void hunters now stalked Diana across the examination floor. Adnan leaped from his seat, but Professor Vextar's firm hand stopped him. "The examination parameters are clear. No interference." "But she'll die," Adnan protested. "Then she doesn't deserve to be here," Krex sneered from behind them. Diana rolled behind her assigned desk as the largest void hunter lunged. Its claws raked across the metal surface where her head had been moments before. She was trapped, outmatched, and running out of options. The creature circled her position like sharks scenting blood. That's when she remembered something her grandmother had told her during childhood nightmares. "There's no such thing as monsters under the bed, sweetheart. But if there were, they'd be more afraid of you than you are of them." Diana pressed her hand against the cool metal of the desk's underside and whispered something that made several nearby cadets' universal translators malfunction with confused static. It wasn't in any known galactic language, it was much older than that. The temperature in the auditorium dropped 10 degrees. "What's she doing?" Professor Vextar muttered, his 4 eyes focusing on readings that shouldn't be possible. The shadows beneath Diana's desk began to writhe and twist, defying the auditorium's bright lighting. Something was emerging from the darkness, something that existed in the spaces between spaces, in the fears that every species carried in their genetic memory. The void hunters stopped their attack, suddenly sensing a presence that made their primitive hunter instincts scream warnings. From beneath the desk came a sound like grinding metal mixed with a child's laughter, followed by appendages that weren't quite tentacles and weren't quite arms, covered in what might have been scales or might have been eyes. "Impossible," breathed Professor Vextar. "Humans don't have psychic abilities." "We don't," Diana said calmly, standing as her otherworldly companion fully manifested. "But we have something better. We have imagination. And every human child knows that the scariest monsters live in the dark places where adults tell us nothing exists." The creature, for lack of a better term, towered over the void hunters, its form shifting and changing as it drew upon every nightmare, every horror story, every whispered tale of things that go bump in the night that humanity had ever conceived. It was the boogeyman and the thing under the bed, the shadow in the closet and the face at the window, all rolled into one primordial terror. The void hunters, predators who had never known fear, whimpered and fled. But they weren't the only ones running. Throughout the auditorium, cadets of every species felt something primal awaken in their minds, the understanding that humans had spent millennia not just surviving their nightmares, but befriending them. Krex and his Zephyrian conspirators scrambled for the exits, their earlier bravado replaced by something approaching existential dread. Even Professor Vextar took several steps backward, his crystalline skin flickering with nervous energy patterns. That's why humans don't need to be the strongest or the fastest, Diana continued conversationally as her shadowy companion settled back into the darkness beneath her desk, like a faithful pet. We're the species that looked at the dark and decided to make friends with what we found there. Adnan found himself grinning despite the chaos. He'd always known Diana was special, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. Around them, the few remaining cadets stared in a mixture of awe and terror. Examination concluded, Professor Vexitar announced, his voice slightly shaky. Cadet Reeves achieves top marks. As the auditorium slowly emptied, Diana packed her notes calmly. The safety protocols were restored, the holographic enemies deactivated, and her unusual study partner had retreated to whatever dimension served as its home. How? Adnan asked as he approached her desk. Diana smiled, the expression somehow both innocent and terrifying. My grandmother always said that humans are the only species that tell scary stories for fun. We're not afraid of monsters, Adnan. We create them, control them, and when necessary. She glanced meaningfully at the empty space where the Zephyrians had been sitting. We introduce them to bullies. Word of the incident spread quickly through the academy. From that day forward, no cadet, regardless of species, dared to underestimate the small human girl who kept nightmares as pets. And whenever someone asked why humans had earned their place among the galaxy's defenders, the answer was always the same. Because in a universe full of monsters, it's useful to have allies who taught monsters how to be scary in the first place. Diana graduated at the top of her class. Adnan came in a close second. And somewhere in the darkness beneath desks throughout the galaxy, things that shouldn't exist smiled with far too many teeth, waiting patiently for the next time a human child needed a friend.